They were out early one morning, panning in the stream for gold, surrounded by the rising mountains. Old prospector with a tale for two, he brushed around in the pan, and pointing out what lay within was ordinary sand. He began with his story about 20 years before, and a younger man who sought his fortune. With a tear or two he told of searching for his treasure, but making known the gold he sought was ordinary pleasure. There were years of doing without, and there were years of plenty. I started thinking that life was never steady, excepting when the bills came in and I had no money to pay. Whiskey had never tasted better ordinarily. Concluded his story as it filled the air with a laugh, saying how he found the Lord and Savior, and how he found the river of life by which his day unfolds, and pointing out what stands within is not ordinary gold, and pointing out what stands within is not ordinary gold. Trust in God, believe upon His promises. Through His word we can see His wonders, signs and miracles of His love. We can return His love with devotion, standing on His word before all men. We are His beloved and His chosen, walking in this life renewed with peace. Trust in God, believe upon His promises. see his wonders, signs and miracles of his love. We can return his love with devotion, standing on his word before all men. We are his beloved and his chosen, walking in this life renewed with peace. Trust in God, believe upon his promises. Trust in God, believe upon his promises.
All right, God bless you all. My name is Mark Wallace. This is True North Studio, and today the topic is Luckier Than Lucky. Luckier Than Lucky is a title designed to make you think and maybe get a little bit under your skin. Now, I know that many of you get an eye twitch, when you hear the word luck used in a Christian teaching, which is partly why I'm using it. Why do some people seem to catch all the breaks, have all the luck, see fortune shine down upon them, while others seem to get beat at every turn? Well, there must be a reason. Matthew 5:45 says, "For he maketh his sun to rise on the evil and on the good, and sendeth rain on the just and on the unjust." In that God rains down blessings on both the evil and on the good, why is there such a marked difference between how some people seem to be more blessed than others? Why is there a notable difference between the lucky and the unlucky, even among Christians? Have lucky people found a way to persuade Providence to smile upon them? Have some people found a way to crack the luck code? Did someone find a way to notice the blessings that God has already set right in front of us? Honestly, I think it is possible. An elementary school word search would show you that the word luck first appeared in the English language in the 1800s. That's over 200 years after the King James Version was put to print. That's why it's not used in the older versions of the Bible. The Dutch word luck, L-U-C, originally meant happiness or good fortune. It meant you felt good all over. You were blessed. You were happy. And amazing things were going on. We all like amazingly good things to happen to us, don't we? Sure. Well, over the next 150 years, the word luck morphed from happiness into a dice-rolling Wheel of Fortune Vegas term. Today I'm going to show you that there are 4 things that all lucky people do that make them seem lucky. These 4 simple actions can be learned and practiced by anyone, and should be. I believe that any of us can adopt these 4 super simple behaviors used by all lucky people so that you too can finally harvest the good that God has planted all over the earth just for you. So get ready to get luckier. The 4 things all lucky people do. Well, Professor Richard Wiseman did a 10-year scientific study into the knowledge of luck. He studied hundreds of people. He discovered, quote, lucky people generate their own good fortune via 4 basic principles. 1, they're skilled at creating and noticing chance opportunities. 2, making lucky decisions by listening to their intuition. 3, creating self-fulfilling prophecies via positive expectations. And 4, adopting a resilient attitude that transforms bad luck into good. Now we're going to go over each of these and they'll make a little more sense. Number 1, all lucky people are skilled at noticing chance opportunities. All lucky people notice opportunities that most people miss. Dr. Wiseman said, quote, "Lucky people are skilled at creating, noticing, and acting upon chance opportunities. They do this in various ways, which include building and maintaining a strong network, adopting a relaxed attitude to life, and being open to new experiences." Now, we may call it being observant or keeping it real, or being in the game or being in the moment. But you could also say, be ready for revelation or inspiration. Now, we all know that most blessings, most inspiration, and even most revelation will usually come from a direction we weren't looking. And any of you who are adept in receiving revelation, you know exactly what I'm talking about. It usually will come in a way you weren't thinking. Have you ever driven down the street and noticed a house or a building that you'd never noticed before? And you wondered, what? When did they build that? But you knew it's been there all along. We've all seen that, haven't we? And we wonder why we never saw it before. You ever thought that? How come I never saw that house before? Well, it's because we've made it a habit at that spot to always look to the other side of the street. And it's always been there. We just never noticed it. We looked right when we should have looked left, or looked left when we should have been looking right. And it's just how life goes. I ask you, how many of God's blessings have we bypassed because we're looking the wrong way? If God supplied all your need according to his riches and glory, if he's promised health and prosperity and we don't have it, I guarantee somewhere, somehow, some way, we're looking the wrong way. And I'm going to show you a way to beat that. So Dr. Wiseman mentions that unlucky people are usually so set in their ways that they're not open to opportunity. Quote, "Luck is what happens when preparation meets opportunity." Seneca the Younger, who is a Roman philosopher of the first century. Acting on chance opportunities reminds me of a kid on my youth baseball team while living on a base in Japan. Our team was called the Astros. For 2 years running, we were league champs, never lost a game. The weakest link on the team was a kid named BZ. I know what you're thinking. Yes, he looked exactly like his name sounds. The kid struck out every single time at bat. And we all expected him to strike out every time he was at bat. Nobody hated him. He was just BZ. And BZ always struck out. Even the parents in the stands, including his own, were not in agreement when BZ came up to bat. After all, it was a given. BZ always struck out. Even BZ expected BZ to strike out. Well, BZ was the kid famous on base for breaking his arm while trying to parachute out of his second-story base housing bedroom window while holding the four corners of his bed sheet. Some of you had a friend like BZ. Maybe you were BZ. One day, BZ's luck changed. A door opened and he noticed. He walked up to the plate with his typical unsure walk, adjusted his crooked glasses, and stood with the bat on his shoulder as the first pitch thudded into the catcher's thick leather mitt. Boom. "Strike one," the umpire grunted. BZ didn't want to go down just standing there, so he swung wildly as the second pitch whizzed past him. "Strike two!" And the guy on deck, the next batter, was just waiting for the inevitable, waiting for BZ to strike out. He sighed, looked down, and tapped the dirt from his cleats with his wooden bat. Well, the third pitch, a fastball, was way low. But BZ swung wildly at it anyway. A swing and a miss. And before the ump could act out, "Strike three, you're out of here," something happened. Something happened. As luck would have it, the catcher let the low fastball blow past him and it rolled all the way to the backstop. BZ froze, but everyone in the stands, even the kids from the opposing team, stood up and screamed, "Run, BZ, run!" BZ ran. In Little League Baseball, there's a weird rule. A batter may attempt to advance to first base on an uncaught third strike. Well, the batter can run to first base just like he'd hit the ball, but he needs to outrun the catcher's throw. Well, BZ, unused to having a chance, and having never made it to first base in 2 years, ran awkwardly. It was like he was running on ice with bees chasing him. As he got close to first base, he did something that nobody does. He slid head first. Then the catcher, in all the excitement, overthrew the first baseman, and the ball rolled helplessly into right field. Then the crowd on both sides of the field were all on their feet now. Kids with their faces against the chain link fence were all screaming, "Run, BZ, run!" BZ got up and ran to second base. Again, he slid head first. The befuddled right fielder, adrenaline surging, overthrew his teammate at second. The ball rolled deep into left field. Now things went into slow motion. Even the birds in the sky seemed to stop what they're doing to watch the miracle of Chofu. BZ, with his bucktooth smile, got up and ran with all his might to third base, but this time he didn't slide. He just kept running. Our base coach wildly waving him on toward home. Something changed in BZ. He rounded the corner of third base like a practice pro. Unbelievably, they overthrew third base and the ball rang into the chain link fence near the dugout. BZ, not taking any chances, slid face first into home, and the crowd on both sides went nuts. BZ got a home run on errors. It was the only time he scored the entire season, but it was epic. Because of the catcher's mistake, BZ took the opportunity to run and run and run. It was his lucky day. Makes me think of the Old Testament record about noticing opportunity. In 2 Kings 6, we read about the account of the siege of Samaria by the Syrian army. And a siege means they surrounded the city, surrounded a town to starve them out. And the siege went on and on. People were getting hungrier and hungrier. It brought on a severe famine to Samaria. Food was so scarce that only the rich people could afford it. People were dying of hunger. Things were so desperate that some women even cooked and ate their own babies. But then at the beginning of chapter 7, the prophet Elijah speaks by revelation and said that by this time tomorrow, food will be available in abundance and prices will be restored to pre-famine levels. Now, I'm not sure who listened, but I know who acted. Then 2 Kings chapter 7, verse 3, and there were 4 leprous men at the entering of the gate, and they said one to another, "Why sit we here till we die?" These grotesquely deformed men dying from the outside in noticed an opportunity to live. And they said to each other, if we say we will enter into the city, then the famine is in the city and we shall die there. And if we sit here, we die also. Now, therefore, come, let us fall into the host of the Syrians. And if they save us alive, we shall live. And if they kill us, we shall but die. No matter what, we're going to die unless we go into the Syrian camp. And we might die there. If we go in the Syrian camp, they're either going to kill us or they're going to let us live. But if we sit here, we know we're going to die. Verse 5, and they rose up in the twilight to go unto the camp of the Syrians. And when they were come to the uttermost part of the camp of Syria, behold, there was no man there. For the Lord had made the host of the Syrians to hear the noise of chariots and a sound of horses, even the horses of a great host. And they said one to another, Lo, the king of Israel hath hired against us the king of the Hittites and the king of the Egyptians to come upon us. The Syrian army thought that the powerful Egyptian and Hittite army was bearing down on them. So they split and they left everything. They left their tents. They left all their food and all their supplies. These 4 lepers made a life and death decision. An amazing opportunity opened that saved them and all the people of Samaria. Just like the prophet said, these unlikely heroes were part of God's plan. BZ was given a chance opportunity and scored a home run, his first time on base in 2 years. The 4 lepers saw a chance opportunity and saved the starving people of Samaria. Lucky people are always aware of opportunities outside their normal routine. Luckier people know that God will show them the abundance that He's already supplied. Number 2, all lucky people listen to their gut. You ever heard that term? We talked about being aware of our surroundings and being open to new possibilities. Now we turn that focus inward. We must be aware of our inner voice, that inward man, intuition, instinct, insight, revelation, a hunch, or gut feeling, whatever you want to call it. Dr. Wiseman said lucky people make effective decisions by listening to their intuition and gut feelings. They also take steps to actively boost their intuitive abilities. Lucky people get good at noticing and listening to their gut. We might say that we learn to hear the still small voice of God. That's what we might say. Now I'm going to tell you the story of a man who survived 2 atomic bombs. Mr. Yamaguchi was a hard-working family man who lived in Japan during World War II. And even though the war was on, his boss sent him to the Mitsubishi factory in the city of Hiroshima. Well, the day he visited the plant in Hiroshima, the Americans dropped the first atomic bomb on that city. About 140,000 people died that day from one single bomb. Unlike most, Mr. Yamaguchi sustained only a few minor injuries and was able to return to his home in Nagasaki and went right back to work. Well, the Japanese vowed to fight even harder against the Americans after this. 3 days later, while he was being yelled at by his supervisor back in Nagasaki, in his office, the guy was yelling at him for telling all the other workers that one single bomb dropped by the Americans destroyed the entire city of Hiroshima. A second atomic bomb was dropped and detonated over Nagasaki. And during that very meeting with his boss, the atomic bomb over Nagasaki exploded, killing maybe 75,000 people. During both blasts, Mr. Yamaguchi was in a spot that somehow shielded him from the blast. A few inches different in any direction would have ended his life. Ever since then, Mr. Yamaguchi tried to live a quiet and normal life. He told everyone that he could talk to that he believed that God planted a path for him. He considered himself lucky. He listened to his gut and he lived to the ripe old age of 93. There's a story in the book of Kings where a prophet of God named Elijah took a bold stand against the evil king and queen, Ahab and Jezebel. Some of you have heard of her. And also 450 of their false prophets. And to thank him for his service as being a prophet, Jezebel sent out a kill order to eliminate him. Okay, to snuff him. And he knew she meant business. I mean, Jezebel, if anything, she meant business. So he ran for his life, this prophet did. And he hid for 40 days in the wilderness in a desert cave. Now God, knowing Elijah needed to get moving and get out of that stupid cave, asked him what he was doing hiding in the cave. What are you doing there, Elijah? And he answered God and played the victim card, like I might, telling God that nobody listened to him anymore, nobody loved me, and nobody likes me. You feel sorry for yourself. That's where you're going to go usually, and especially if you're a leader of sorts. And God had to remind him to listen to God and not even to his own thoughts. Not easy to do. 1 Kings 19, verse 11 from the Message. Then he was told, "Go, stand on the mountain at attention before God. God will pass by." Then a hurricane wind ripped through the mountains and shattered the rocks before God. But God wasn't to be found in the wind. And after the wind, an earthquake. But God wasn't in the earthquake. And after the earthquake, a fire. But God wasn't in the fire. And after the fire, a gentle and quiet whisper. We all want the voice of God to be loud and bold and magnificent. But the voice of God, or your inner voice, or that hunch, that still small voice, is usually as soft and gentle as a quiet whisper. Can you hear it? Can you still hear it with all this stuff going on in the world? Here's a Japanese proverb. The day you decide to do is your lucky day. See, lucky people listen to their gut. Luckier people listen to the still small voice of God. Now, number 3. So we've talked about 2 things. One is being aware, being observant, right? The next one is listening to your gut, or that still small voice. Now, number 3, that all lucky people are eternally optimistic in their expectations. Sounds easy. Dr. Wiseman also said lucky people are certain that the future will be bright. Over time, that expectation becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy because it helps lucky people persist in the face of failure and positively shapes their interaction with other people. You've all heard about a self-fulfilling prophecy. Somebody keeps saying they're going to die. They usually die, right? So people who always think they're going to prosper, they do. Just, it's a self-fulfilling. Well, lucky people always are optimistic. They do not talk negatives about themselves or their life. A gritty, ultra-positive attitude must be developed no matter what's going on around you. Quote, luck affects everything. Let your hook always be cast in the stream where you least expect it. There will be a fish. Ovid, 1st century. I like that. Cast a line, there will be a fish. Now I know people in this room that feel that way when they fish. You see, I know that sometimes we need to pull up our collars and tuck in our chins and push into the wind. But sometimes we just grit it out and stay optimistic in our expectations. That's what lucky people do. Have you ever heard of a super lucky Australian guy named Bill Morgan? Well, Bill loved his family and loved his life until one day he was crushed in a horrific car crash and he was pronounced dead at the scene. To everyone's surprise, 14 minutes later he woke up and all seemed well until he fell into a coma. Okay, still it's not bad, but after 12 days on life support, the family he loved so much gave up on him and decided there was no hope, so they pulled the plug. But once again, he woke up. And to celebrate his new lease on life, Bill bought a scratch-it lottery ticket. And lo and behold, he won a new car. And the local news channel heard about it and thought his story was so amazing, so far-fetched that they asked him to reenact that winning moment by scratching yet another lottery ticket they bought him on camera. Well, Bill Morgan, with his loving family at his side, scratched the new ticket and was caught on camera winning $250,000. Bill Morgan lived on the sunny side of the street. He lived because he was super optimistic. He expected good things to happen to him. Now here's a Bible story of being eternally optimistic in a very negative situation. Once upon a time, there was a king called Nebuchadnezzar. And he had this huge golden image erected to show his power and his strength and his glory. He liked that statue so much that he commanded that all the people in his kingdom were supposed to bow down and worship this image whenever they heard a certain song played. Sort of like musical chairs of death, okay? And anyone who disobeyed would be thrown into a burning fiery furnace. 3 young Hebrew men, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, refused to bow down to the king's national idol when they heard that one song. And these 3 kids were arrested. And they said, and you can read it in Daniel 3, verse 16. I'm going to read it from the Voice. Nebuchadnezzar, imagine talking to the king. Nebuchadnezzar, we have no need to defend our actions in this matter, for we are ready for the test. If you throw us into that blazing furnace, then the God we serve is able to rescue us from a furnace of a blazing fire and release us from your power, your majesty. 18. But even if he does not, O king, you can be sure that we will not serve your gods and we will not worship the golden statue that you erected. Furious, Nebuchadnezzar flew into a rage and he ordered the furnace to be heated up 7 times hotter than it was normally heated. 7 times. Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego were bound tightly with ropes, tighter than even usual, and they were thrown into the flames. The fiery furnace was so hot that day that it killed the soldiers who threw them in. That's a hot fire. King Nebuchadnezzar peered into the furnace from a distance and marveled at what he saw. Daniel 3:25. Why do I see 4 men, completely unbound, walking around in the middle of the fire? They don't appear to be hurt at all. What's going on? And the 4th, he appears to be like a son of the gods. So the king asked the men to come out of the furnace. So how many guys were thrown in that furnace? 3. How many did he see in there? 4. So the king asked these guys real nicely, maybe, I don't know, to come on out of the furnace. Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego walked out of that fiery hellhole unharmed. Not even a hair on their head was even singed. As crazy as it may seem, their clothes didn't even smell like smoke. This sort of blew Nebuchadnezzar's egotistical mind, but he was impressed with these 3 young men. He spoke highly of the God of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego and the angel who rescued them. And he commended them for being willing to give it all for what they believed in and for staring down death with a positive and hopeful attitude. The power of God combined with the power of positive attitude delivered Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego and all the Hebrew people that day. Lucky people are always eternally optimistic. Luckier people always maintain a mindset of hope. Number 4, all lucky people find some positive about every negative. All lucky people find some positive about every negative. It seems easy. This final discipline found in every single lucky person that's ever lived on earth takes controlling our thoughts when things are the hardest. Lucky people find the silver lining no matter how bad things get. And you can tell how you think by what's coming out of your mouth. Okay, if you're pissing, moaning, complaining all the time, you don't have this attitude, okay? But you can. You can change, right? Dr. Richard Wiseman said in an interview, lucky people tend to see the positive side of their ill fortune. They imagine how things could have been worse. In one interview, a lucky volunteer arrived with his leg in a plaster cast and described how he had fallen down a flight of stairs. And Dr. Wiseman asked him whether he still felt lucky. And this guy cheerfully explained that he felt luckier than ever before. And he pointed out, I could have broke my neck. Okay? Control every thought. Change every negative thought into a positive one. It takes work, folks. This is not easy because the whole world does it differently, doesn't it? Our final story that I'm going to share is about Fran Selak, the luckiest unlucky man in the world. Well, the story of Fran Selak is so unbelievable that if it was put in a movie, you'd think it was all a lie, pure fabrication, pure Hollywood. Well, Selak cheated death 7 times. Fran was born in 1929 in the country of Croatia. And his lucky-unlucky timeline goes something like this. In 1962, he had his first brush with death when he was traveling through an icy canyon on a train. Suddenly, the train jumped the rails and plunged into an icy river. He was pulled out of the freezing water with only a broken arm. 17 others died that day. In 1963, 1 year later, the first and only time he ever rode on an airplane, Fran was sucked out of the plane as a malfunctioning door blew open. He tumbled helplessly through the air, but miraculously landed on a large haystack. 19 others died when the plane crashed. Then in 1966, a bus he was in skidded off an icy road and into a frigid river, drowning 4. He swam to safety with only a few cuts and bruises. Accident number 4 came in 1970 when his car caught fire as he was driving down the highway. He managed to get out of the blazing vehicle mere seconds before the fuel tank exploded and the whole car went up. In 1973, 3 years later, a faulty fuel pump in his cheap Eastern European car spewed gasoline all over the hot engine and ignited. Flames blew through the air vents like a blowtorch. You see, he escaped with his life, but a little less hair. In 1995, he had his 6th lucky-unlucky accident when he was walking along the street and got hit by a bus. He walked away with minor injuries. In 1996, the following year, he was driving in the mountains on a narrow road, and he rounded a hairpin corner only to see a UN truck fill his windshield. With not enough time to stop and nowhere to go, he overcorrected and his car plowed through the guardrails and he flew off a 300-foot cliff. He was ejected from the car. The car sailed through the air. He sailed through the air, and he just so happened to crash into the lone growing tree that's growing out of the side of the mountain. He held on for dear life and watched his car hit the bottom of the gorge and explode. A few years later, in 2003, 2 days after his 73rd birthday, Fran won $1 million when he purchased his first ever lottery ticket. He decided to give most of the money away to friends and relatives, choosing a simple, less eventful life. Fran Selak is considered by many to be both the luckiest and unluckiest man in the world. Somehow Fran was able to turn any negative into a positive. Just like you, he was a half full glass guy. He was a lemons into lemonade guy. Now I ask you, how did Moses keep a positive attitude when the entire might of the Egyptian army was bearing down on him and the million or so people he was trying to protect and rescue from slavery? How did he do it? How did Noah keep building an ark for over 100 years? I have trouble doing things for 1 day. 100 years. How did Esther stand up to the king so that her people could be delivered? You know, how did young David, a skinny teenage kid, face down the hulking 10-foot tall Goliath? Imagine, what did he do with his mind? How did Paul write most of the epistles while under arrest or in jail? You ever been in jail and tried to write a letter? Imagine having to think and try to write epistles while you're in jail. How did Jesus give his entire life for us? How did he suffer the torture, the persecution, and being crucified for us and die around 30 years old? How did he do it? What did he do with his mind? Doesn't the Bible say because of the hope that was set before him, he endured the cross, despising the shame, and is set down at the right hand of God? Yeah, because of hope. You know, lucky people find some positive about every negative, and hope is positive, right? You see, lucky people find some positive about every negative. Luckier people expect God's miracles to overturn any worldly problems. So what do we do with this information? Today we saw 4 principles that all lucky people apply. All lucky people notice opportunities outside their normal routine. All lucky people listen to their gut. All lucky people are eternally optimistic. And all lucky people find some positive about every single negative. All lucky people do these 4 behaviors so often they don't even notice them anymore. That's why they seem so lucky. The only difference between a lucky person and an amazing believer like you is the Spirit of God. With the gift of Holy Spirit, you can see what God wants you to see and inquire all the incredible things God has set aside for you. And you're going to help a few others along the way too. Even with the Spirit of God, you will still need to utilize those 4 luck builders. It's going to take both, folks. Take the Spirit of God and an act of the will. So the next time your mind or the devil that sits on your shoulder, like in the cartoons, tells you, you don't have enough education. You don't have enough money. You don't have enough time. You had a bad childhood. You know, you've been abused. You gave your life to a church or a person or a cause that took more than it ever gave back. You were born on the wrong side of town. You were born into the wrong side of the wrong family. You were born at the wrong time in history. Or worst of all, you wish you were never born at all. If these thoughts ever pop up, do what all great believers do. Do what all great believers do. 1, know that God will show you the abundance He has already supplied for you. 2, get good at listening to the still small voice of God. 3, always maintain a mindset of hope. And 4, for God's sake, expect God's miracles to overturn any worldly problem that you might face. As Romans 8:31 says, if God be for us, who can be against us? And what's the answer? No one. You see, if the word lucky makes your eye twitch, know that the Spirit of God makes you luckier than lucky. People, you are blessed. I love you. God bless.